Good morning, everyone. Hope I find you well. Today we're going to have a little look at two different topics. I thought we'd recap balance sheets, which I didn't actually check whether I'd done a full video on. Actually, I can't remember doing. Maybe I did, I can't remember. But I'm going to do these things that I'm going to call 1 minute wonders, where I'm going to go through a theory in 1 minute. Really quick, just things that'll bring you up. So I'm going to do balance sheets again anyway, so I'll upload that maybe later or soon anyway. So don't worry about that anyway. If you're someone like, oh, I've not done balance sheets for a bit, that's okay. Just come with me on this. Or as I said, if you're watching this in the future and the 1 minute wonder stuff's up, then feel free to watch that first and then come back if you can't remember about balance sheets. Anyway, so we're gonna do balance sheets, and the reason that I wanted to recap balance sheets was because we're going to talk about depreciation, and depreciation is a new topic for the second year of worth of content. But it's very closely linked to balance sheets and the usefulness of it in those different sort of documents that you have to produce and things like that. So I thought, well, good time to do a little recap on balance sheets and stuff like that as well. And there's also a thing called window dressing we've not really talked about either. Okay, so let's get straight into it, shall we? Let's have a look. So here we are, and we're going to start off by having a look at main components of a balance sheet and the way it's constructed, explain what is meant by working capital and calculate it, explain what is meant by capital employed and calculate it, interpret and analyse a balance sheet. This should be revision for you essentially at this point, because you should already know it, because we've already done it in the first year. We definitely already talked about balance sheets and stuff like this. So if you are, as I said, if you are someone who's joining us late, if you're someone who's not done this before, please go back to either the original balance sheet lesson in terms of that. In fact, you know what? I'm going to double check for you now. I'm going to check 1 second whether I've actually done one or not. Which should be good, wouldn't it? 1 second, I will tell you now. Balance sheets. Oh no, now I've got a video of myself. That's good, isn't it? No, I didn't want to. I didn't want to play that. I just wanted to know if I'd done a video on it. Business plans, income statements. Have we not? That's weird. I thought we would have. We definitely covered them in the first year. I'm sure we did. Oh, well, either way, I'll put them on them. I'll do a little extra video anyway for that anyway. So don't worry about it. But anyway, I like to be dead on it. I like to be absolutely certain about I've done it right for you. So there you go. Anyway, so let's have a look at what these things are, what they mean, why they're here. Okay, so not dead long on this, and then we're gonna have a look at some depreciation stuff like that. Excuse me. So, what is a balance sheet? Well, a balance sheet is a statement of a firm's financial position, detailing its assets and liabilities at a specific point in time. Now, it's really important that you remember, that it's at a specific point in time. It doesn't show us trends. It doesn't show us in comparison to other time. We can do things to it to use it to give us a better indication of things by looking at things like percentage change. By looking at what we were talking about, those you could reasonably use those index numbers that we did yesterday to be able to see a change. But essentially, it's percentage change between years, isn't it? So in balance sheets, they are useful for a snapshot to show us what's going on, and they're useful in other ways, which we'll get onto in a second. But they're not that useful for seeing the bigger picture, essentially, like over time or anything like that. They're not that. You need to use them with other documents, essentially. So it says, the use or purpose of a balance sheet for reporting purposes as part of a limited company's annual accounts. Remember, with limited companies, you have a legal obligation to publish accounts. So it's important not only for stakeholders, but for government and things to have a look, make sure that you're paying the right tax and stuff like that. to help you understand, help you and other interested parties such as investors, creditors, shareholders to assess the worth of your business at a given moment. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the window dressing stuff. As a tool to help you analyze and improve the management of your business. Remember, we're talking about efficiency. We're talking about how useful you are at, how efficient you are at changing inputs into outputs, how effective you are at making profit, about your gross profit to your net profit and things like that, and whether there is a big issue between, remember we said if you had loads of gross profit but not much net profit, maybe it's just fixed assets or something that are too high. If you haven't got that much gross profit, then maybe it's your cost of sales that are too high, and we need to do something about that and do something with your suppliers and things like that. So there's always solutions. It's just not as simple as just saying it, is it? Key terms, okay, fixed assets or non-current assets. We've got long-term assets on. Can you remember how long a long-term asset is? A long-term asset or a non-current asset is anything that we own for more than a year. Current assets, the short-term assets a business owns, anything that we own less than a year. Or anything, and the same thing for the other two. Current liabilities, what the business owes and repays within a year, and non-current liabilities or long-term liabilities are anything that we pay in longer than a year, or any debt that we will have for longer than a year. Okay. So it says complete the definitions and formula for these different things. Now this is a balance sheet, if you remember, two different things, and as you can see, we've got 2 different years. Now in a normal balance sheet, you wouldn't have 2 years. You'd only have one. You'd only have this. You'd either have this one or this one. You wouldn't have 2. This is just for the purposes of comparing them with each other. But if you remember, we've got all our assets at the top. We've got our liabilities. Then we've got our net assets, sort of like a total. And then we've got the balance bit at the bottom. Essentially we've got to balance these out. Okay, where it says total shareholders' capital has got to equal net assets. This net assets here, and the total shareholders' capital has got to be the same. Those two things have got to equal each other, and as you see, it does do in there. So let's just go through really, really quickly what this is, just as a quick recap. So you put all your data on. So fixed assets. What is fixed assets? Complete the definitions. So what are fixed assets? Fixed assets are things which take longer, that we're going to have for longer than a year. Formula wise, they are just your fixed assets times by cost, essentially, aren't they? In terms of this, you just add up all your fixed cost. Add up all the values of your fixed assets. That's it. That's how you figure these out. Okay, and then so in terms of this, then we've got current assets. Now, your current assets in this regard are anything that you're going to own for less than a year. It can be things like stock. It can be things like debtors, things like that. And remember, when we talk about creditors or debtors, remember it's from your perspective. Okay, so it's debtors to you, people who owe you money. I always used to get confused with that one. Cash physically in the bank, yes, you're likely to spend it within the year. It's not all your money. It's just liquid cash. It's likely that we're going to spend some of it. Anyway, and then we've got total current assets. So, what's the formula for that? Well, for current assets, it is essentially what anything that we were going to. So, if we wanted to work out total current assets, you get all your current assets, you stock, your debtors, cash at bank, and things like that. Add them all up, there you get your total current assets down there. All right, so quite simple. How you work these out? You work out your stock and your debtors and that separately. They all have their own formulas, but it's basically just the thing times by the value, whatever it is. All right. And then current liabilities, so things which we owe, but we will pay for in less than a year, or within a year. We've got trade creditors, others, and then we've got total current liabilities. They're things which we would pay within a year, but they are, we just add them up, gives you total current liabilities, don't we? And then we've got long-term liabilities. Sorry, current liabilities are things which we're going to pay within a year. Long-term liabilities are things which we're going to pay for more than a year. Add them in. And then at the bottom, we've got net assets. And net assets, if you remember, net is when you've taken everything off. Okay, so net is the final one. So we've got our assets, we've added them up at 750 plus 365, and then we've taken off our other ones. So we've taken off 233 and 576, which should give us 306. Okay, And you're very welcome to test that, but that's essentially what it is. So you get all your assets, add them up, take away all your liabilities, and it should give you your net assets. Okay. Now, when it balances, when we're talking about balance sheet, it's got basically what we use it for is it's a document which shows where the value of the business has come from. So the actual money, the monetary value, the asset value in the business, where is that value come from? Where is that value? Where is it emanating from? Because the worry is with this that essentially what we're saying is if your shareholders capital at the bottom here, we've got shareholders capital, share capital, so that's money that we made from shares, and then reserves, so that's like money that we've kept back from things. Okay, now if we're showing that we actually have more assets than we do share capital and reserves together, basically what the question would be, well, where's this value come from? Where has these assets come from? How could you possibly have where's the money come from to be able to spend on assets when you didn't get it from last year's pay, or rather you didn't get it from last year's profit or any money that was in the business already, and you didn't get it from selling shares. So where did you get the money from? All right. Now, I know hopefully it's starting to ring true to you. Think, well, it would probably be fraud or some kind of theft or something like that. Like there wouldn't be any reasonable thing. So essentially, if these don't match, if our shareholders' capital down here, if they don't match with your net assets, something's wrong. Either someone's stealing from you, something dodgy is going on in this company, or they've made a mistake in terms of valuing assets and things like that. But basically, what we would be saying was, let's say that you've got in your bank, you've got £1,000. Okay, so you go out and spend your £1,000 on assets, but you actually come back with £2,000 worth of assets. So the question would be, well, how did you do that then? Where's all these extra assets come from? Now, I know that you might be thinking, well, what about special offers and stuff? You might come back with a special offer. You might get an asset. That's fine, because you would talk about it in the sense of you would credit it on here in terms of the value of it and it would still add up, because you would be saying, well, look, this amount of money gave me this amount of asset. It would still add up the same. You're never going to have a situation where you're going to have even if you said, well, look, I've got this much assets for this much money, you would then you would value that asset at the amount, if that makes sense. Like, you would still say, oh, well, this asset is 2,000 then, because that's what it's worth, and 1,000 because that's what I spent on it. You wouldn't say, oh, well, this is actually worth in somewhere 2,000, so I'm gonna put it separately. So don't overcomplicate it in your mind. The two different things, you've got your balance at the bottom, your shareholders' capital at the bottom, is basically just saying money in the business, and then your net assets are things that you bought with the money. So those two things have to equal each other, because if they don't, it doesn't make sense to. All right, if they don't equal out, then something's gone wrong. I said you've not paid the right amount of tax, or you've defrauded, or someone's stealing money from you, or something's going on. It's something you need to keep an eye on. Anyway, all right. I hope that makes sense. Okay, working capital. So what is working capital? Now, the finance needed in a business to pay for the day-to-day expenses of a business. So working capital is your current assets minus your current liabilities. It's actually your liquid asset. It's actually the money that you have to spend on things. All right, physically, what do we have today? If I wanted to go and buy, a Snickers from the shop, do I have any money today? Yes, you do. You have to have a look at your working capital. So remember, current assets are things which we're going to have for less than a year. Current liabilities are things that we have to pay for less than a year. So it's very current, here and now. Okay. Now, capital employed. Capital employed is the sum of a company's share capital, reserves, and long-term liabilities. In essence, it's the money used by a business to invest. All right. So for this one, we do shareholder funds plus long-term liabilities. And that gives us our capital employed. It's the money that we've invested into the business, essentially. It's the money it's the money that we use to invest, basically. That's what it's your capital money employed, meaning invested. All right. So as you can see, there's a calculation there for you as well for it. Now, aside from all that, and remember, I will do, as I said, feel free to go back and have a little look at the other thing if you want to have a look at, the sort of balance sheet thing again. But window dressing. Now, you might not have heard of window dressing. It's something that we don't really talk about much in business, especially not in the first year. But you might have heard of it if you do accounting or anything like that. So window dressing is the manipulation of financial accounts by a business to improve the appearance of its performance. All right. Now, it's really important when you're talking about window dressing that window dressing isn't illegal. It's not. You could say it's immoral to some respects because you could argue that you're trying to confuse people. You're trying to make it look better than it actually is. But in the same regard as that, it would be difficult to argue that why shouldn't a business be able to do that if it's working within the law, if it's moving assets about, then why shouldn't it be able to make those accounts look the best they can do? You aren't actually physically changing numbers. You're just moving. You're moving things around to sort of get the best, make it look the best it can. So it's like window dressing is kind of like putting makeup on because you kind of like you're not changing the core thing underneath. it's not surgery. It's just making it look a bit better in that regard. You're just accentuating. You're just trying to draw attention to certain bits and maybe away from problem areas and things like that. So why would a business do it? To, as I said, to draw attention to places that they don't want you to be looking. Maybe if they've been having a bit of a problem with, the efficiency of something like that, or long-term liabilities are particularly high, or short-term, whatever it is that they're trying to do, and they're trying to move your or a shareholder, stakeholders gaze away from that into looking at, actually, they're doing really well because look at the assets they've got, look at this thing. Is it illegal? No, it's not illegal as long as you're not breaking any rules. You're not defrauding anyone in terms of that. If you are, as long as you are playing by the rules and you are moving things around in terms of moving things like you just might move some assets. You might move some current assets into non-current assets, or you might move them around, or vice versa, to make it look like you've got more, or maybe free some money up, or maybe sell some stuff just before to be able to boost your revenues and things like that. But that's all legal. You're allowed to do that. Like it's your accounts. It's your business. You can do what you want with it to an extent. The difference would be if you were just lying on the document. That's not window dressing. That's just fraud. So keep an eye on that. It's an important one. All right. Now, methods of window dressing, what we can do, overstate your brand value, so you can increase it to say, well, look, we've got evidence to show that the value is more because of X, Y, and Z, maybe some research you've done, or maybe you could go off all sales data, or whatever it is that you're using to do it, some kind of justification for it. Sale and leaseback, that's an important one, isn't it? So just like I said, you're not doing anything illegal. All you're doing, you are selling assets to be able to free up some long-term liabilities. So maybe it's cars, maybe it's vehicles, maybe it's buildings, whatever it is that you own, or machinery, and then leasing them back. So in which case it frees up the money, makes your accounts look better, and you still have access to the stuff as well. Might not be good in the long term because you might have to pay more for them rather than just paying one fee for them, but potentially it could be. The presentation, so actually just how you physically lay it out, whether, as I said, where you put things, whether it's worth, even when you are presenting your accounts and things like that, there are certain things that you can do to draw attention to things and maybe not draw attention so much to other things, and especially in the way that you present them to your stakeholders, maybe in a document. Yes, the information will be there, but you can usually talk around it. You can usually present it in a way that you think, well, actually, yes, we have had this, but there has been a reason for it, and it's not really a big issue at the minute because this and this. That's a big difference, isn't it? Of saying, well, if you saw a student's grade of an E for a test, and you said, yeah, well, what the problem is that students, the student hasn't done any work, that might be different than saying, well, actually, if you notice, they actually got a U on the last one. So it is an E. It's not great, but ultimately it is getting better. So that's window dressing, isn't it? It's making it look better. It's not actually changed the E. It's just improving it slightly because it makes it sound better than it really is. Exceptional items, these are one-off things. You might talk about things, they talk about these a lot of the time in government when they're doing their accounts, and they're talking about why the economy's in its bits, and they're talking about one-off exceptional items that they've had to pay for, one-off things. I suppose you could argue that in the pandemic and stuff, they're going to be talking about exceptional items, aren't they? They're going to be talking about face masks, they're going to be talking about PPE, they're going to be talking about, the furlough system. It's an exceptional item. It's not something that they would have usually paid for. And if it doesn't mean that the company's doing really badly or really well, but it means that you need to take it in context, don't you? So can you see what I'm doing? I'm sort of putting a positive spin on it, aren't I? And finally, hiding poor investments. You can not specifically talk about your poor investments, can you? You can hide them in amongst other things, just don't draw attention to them. You might be able to, if you really, really look into the accounts hard, if you really look into the detail of them, you might be able to find them, but most stakeholders aren't going to do that. They're going to take you at your word. They're going to want an executive overview of the accounts. They're going to have a look at basically, that your working capital, money at bank, your assets. They might do an acid test or something like that to see how you're doing, if you remember your ratios and stuff like that. And but they're not going to go into too much detail, so it gives you an opportunity to sort of, you're not lying to them, you're just saying it in a more positive way. Impact of demand and inflation on financial accounts. Okay. Now, it says, explain how inflation can make a business appear to be performing better. Think about a following scenario. So, a business is selling vegan products at the start of 2019. Following supermarket campaigns and the popularity of Greg's vegan sausage roll, demand for the vegan products has increased unexpectedly. At first glance, how can this be seen falsely improving a vegan restaurant's performance? Okay, so let's talk about inflation first. Inflation, if you remember, is the time value of money. It's how much the value of the pound or the dollar or whatever it is changes over time. So a pound today is not the same as a pound in a year's time. It will have changed by a percentage, and that's the inflation rate. Okay, so explain how inflation can make a business appear to be performing better. If you've got a situation where you're basically that you'd be looking at it in comparison to, I'm trying to think of a good way of explaining it. Imagine they took a loan, or something. No, that wouldn't be a good way. Right. Imagine, in terms of assets, let's say that you had £100,000 assets, right? And then inflation is running at 10%. Okay, so let's say that you're actually, in real terms, your £100,000 is actually worth £90,000. Okay, in real terms. Now, you're not going to draw attention to that, and that would be a high inflation rate essentially, especially in this country at the minute, which is crazy low. But that would mean that when people saw it at first glance, they would be seeing 100,000 on your accounts, when in actual fact the actual value of 100,000 in today's money would be 90,000. So 100,000 in a year's time would be worth 90,000 of today's money. But you're not saying that. You're not saying, oh yeah, but do take into account of the inflation rate. What you're doing is you're going, well, yeah, we've still got £100,000 worth of gear, which sounds great, doesn't it? So it looks better than it is, and it's not just for that; it's for other things as well. It's the, in terms of the whole value of the company. It depends on, you've got to keep in mind, haven't you, that without inflation rate changes and things like that, and taking into account inflation, that it might seem like a company is doing significantly better, depending on how much the inflation rate is. If it was a large inflation rate, quite a big difference, than it would be if it was any other place. Okay. Now, It says, when we're talking about demand, at first glance, how can they be seen as a falsely improving a vegan restaurant's performance? Well, it would be drawing attention to that they would be claiming that would be an average week, or that would be an average performance, or that would be the new performance, or that they've somehow got this massive group of customers that are really, really wanting to be part of this vegan movement now. And that could be the case to an extent, but it's not really fair, is it, to say that for those months when people are going to that vegan restaurant because it's it's a fad, it's because they're interested in it, it's because they've seen a lot of it on TV, and they did this big, Greg's vegan sausage roll supermarket campaigns. There was these big TV campaigns, but it was in people's eye line, wasn't it, in terms of that? So that would give an unfair representation of the actual demand for that company. You'd have to have a look at it as normal, sort of in the months after the months before, to see how it actually went. Was it going to snap back, or is everybody just going to go vegan? It would be difficult to say, wouldn't it? Okay. Now, evaluate the benefits and drawbacks of window dressing. So the main things that it was good for, it says avoid tax. Now, when we do when we say avoid tax, remember there's a difference between avoiding tax and evading tax. Evading tax is illegal. Evading tax is not doing what you are legally obliged to do. All right. Avoiding tax isn't illegal. It is moving things into the right place. So that's why when you talk about these people who have their assets in offshore accounts and things like that, that's not illegal in that regard, because they are playing by the system. They're not claiming that they don't have any income, as long as they are doing it by the system and things like that, as long as they're abiding by the actual rules. It's like when people get away with tax avoidance. What we could do is, and businesses do it all the time, places like Google, Amazon, Starbucks have been known for it. If I was to say to you, okay, we've got two different companies. We'll just bring you off here a second. So let me just explain this. You've got two different companies, all right, but the two different companies aren't two different companies. They sound like two different companies, but they're not. They're the same company. So we've got Starbucks UK and Starbucks US, okay, and what we do is we say, and the US is a bad example, but let's just for argument's sake, Luxembourg or something like that, then, something unusual, or Cayman Islands or something like that, Starbucks Cayman Islands. All right, so what we do is Starbucks Cayman Islands sells Starbucks UK stock. All right, so Starbucks UK buys all its stock from Starbucks Cayman Islands. And what they do is they will buy it at an increased rate. They will buy it at a rate which is usually more than it's worth, significantly more than it's worth. Which will mean, and you think, why would they do that? Because in the Cayman Islands, there's very little tax, if any tax. So as long as we make our money, as long as we make our profits in the Cayman Islands, then that means that we're only legally responsible to be paying the tax at the Cayman Islands. And we'll pay the small amount of tax that we have to in the UK, but then we'll move all the profits out, because what it'll look like on paper is, and this is totally legit, you can do this under the system, and this is why companies do it. It's not the company's fault. It might be unethical. It depends on how you feel about tax, but from the company's perspective, they're not doing anything illegal. It's the system that needs to change. They are paying what they are legally responsible for paying. And if you ask any of them, that's what they say as well, which they are doing. They've got a point. What they do is they say they buy, £10 million worth of stuff, and they sell £10 million worth of stuff in the UK. That £10 million isn't going to be profit, is it? That £10 million is going to be actually sent to the Cayman Islands in terms of to buy the raw materials and things like that, in order to push any profits into to the Cayman Islands rather than the UK. So it'll look like from us we have to pay a very small amount of thing, because we didn't make any profit in the UK technically. We move it into the Cayman Islands and we can save some tax. That's tax avoidance. Tax evasion would be to purposely and as I said, and that's assuming that's actually legal to do, and that you aren't you are playing by the rules in terms of that. That is legal. You can do that. There isn't anything, as long as you abide by the rules and you fill in the right tax returns and everything like that, and you're doing it. You're allowed to buy stuff from foreign countries and things like that. You're allowed to do that. Evading tax would be not paying what you are supposed to pay. So if Amazon or someone like that weren't doing that, but they were purposely not paying tax when tax bills came through or things like that, that is the difference. You're not allowed to do that. So it's a fine line, really, and you'd have to look into the specifics of it. The issues with it is also the unethicalness, the ethics of it, in terms of, is it really fair to take advantage of an economy when you're not paying into it, So it is a difficult one. I don't think that businesses should be doing that. I mean, I understand it from a business perspective why they do it, but it's not a good idea, is it? In terms of the company, it ends up people like you and me having to make up that for in our tax because companies are taking advantage of us and taking the profits abroad. It's difficult to sustain as well. At some point, the real picture will be seen. You can't keep window dressing it indefinitely. You're purposely trying to mislead people, really. Not massively, but it can be massively sometimes. You're just trying to make it look better than it really is. But it will show itself, whether it is, an overly enthusiastic teacher, whether it is, someone who's saying that you're better than you are, or whatever it is. Those people. Window dressing is what happens when, extreme window dressing ends up with people going on X Factor, doesn't it, and making an absolute fool of themselves, because no one told them the reality of the situation. Benefits, it can attract or deter takeovers depending on what you want to do, because you can make it look more better, worse. If you want to take over, it might be worth doing a bit of window dressing and making it look better. Attract investment, increase your chances of a loan, bonuses, or better performance. So again, it makes it sound like I'm trying to endorse really horrible things. It's not that I'm trying to endorse really horrible things. It's just the fact that, a bit of tweaking here and there is just, that seems fair game, in that regard, doesn't it? So it is a hard one, but yeah, that's what window dressing is. It's thinking. All right. We're going to have a little look at depreciation. Now, the reason that I talked about these together is because depreciation works, it's included a lot on your financial documents and things like that. Okay, so I'm not going to spend ages on this, so don't worry. We've not got ages to do on this. So it says, why is there a different price for the same thing? You've got a Hyundai Tucson, 1.7 CRDI blue drive, 5-door, 2-wheel drive. This one's it's a 2016. This one's 12,595. Full service, one owner, blah blah blah. This one is Hyundai. If you want to buy it today, it's 21,845. Why is that? And it's because of depreciation. It's because that one there has depreciated significantly in price. Well, it's halved in price, hasn't it? Just under halved in price. From when it was originally like this. And depreciation happens for a number of reasons. But it's just a reduction in the implied and also the material value of that product in terms of what people value it at, what you can sell it for, and things like that. So define depreciation, calculate depreciation and net book values using straight line method, explain why depreciation is used, explain how depreciation is shown in final accounts. So we've done these, but let's do it really, really quick. What is a fixed asset? It's something that you own for more than a year. It can be buildings, can be machinery, usually that kind. What kind of fixed assets might a business own? Machinery, vehicles, buildings. In which accounting document would you find fixed assets? Okay, we've just talked about it, haven't we? So it's the balance sheet. Why does the value of the vehicle depreciate over time? Because it's wear and tear, isn't it? It's natural depreciation over time. The more you use it, and the fact that it's got one owner, so there is this already. The fact that it's second hand, people will automatically go towards it being worth less. Does the amount of the value of a vehicle depreciate by the same each year? No, not necessarily. The longer that you have it, the more it depreciates. In fact, vehicles are particularly bad when they've just come off the forecourt. As soon as you own that, you massively take the value off it. That's why there's no real benefit to buying new vehicles, because you actually end up taking the depreciation yourself. You know, that 21 grand, that car that was 21 grand, this one, that would have gone down to probably about 16 as soon as you drove it off the forecourt, which is horrible. That's why I would suggest don't buy new cars, because it doesn't make any sense to. Okay, most fixed assets used by a business will decrease in value over time. This decrease in value is known as depreciation. So remember, fixed assets are things which we're going to have for more than a year. They will decrease in value, whether it's implied value or physical. It's always implied, really, isn't it? But in terms of what people will pay for them, what you can demand for them, they will be worth less. And they're worth less for a number of reasons. So let's have a look at these. It says obsolescence. Now, do you remember obsolescence? It's things going obsolete. And you can plan this. You can do planned obsolescence. If you remember, we talked about it in production. Places like Apple, where they change the design of things, they do planned obsolescence for that. But obsolescence in general, they can just go out of date. Technological advances, fad can change, things like that. Things can become obsolete just naturally through time, through market changes or expectations and things like that. Wear and tear, so natural wear and tear, things just get used up over time. A laptop that you bought in 2011 is not going to be the same in terms of how good it is and how usable it is, because the keyboard will have been used more, the camera will have been used more, the screen will have been used more, whatever it is. Just naturally there will be it's already had some use, hasn't it? And they don't last forever, products. Lack of maintenance can be an issue. If you don't maintain things, then they will go down. They will depreciate in general, don't they? The value of that. New technology, as we've just talked about, and the passing of time in general just causes depreciation, or the causes of depreciation, and as it says there. Okay. So how do we calculate it then? Well, we can use a thing called the straight line method. Now, the difficulty with the straight line method is the fact that the application of an equal amount of depreciation. Now, we've already established it doesn't decrease all the time. All products don't, all things that we have don't depreciate over time, a straight line method like this. But it is a way that we can do it, and it's more sensible than not having depreciation at all. So the application of an equal amount of depreciation to each year of an asset's useful life is known as a straight line method, because we use a straight line, it shows a straight line going up or down. The decrease of a value of a fixed asset over time is calculated by the historic cost, so the original cost, minus the residual value. So what is it worth now? So what did it start with? What's it worth now? And then divided by the useful life in years. Okay, so what did it start with? What was its original value? So if we took that one at the start, we'd have our 21,000 blah 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 minus our 12,000 blah blah blah. That'd leave us with something about like 9 grand or something like that. And then we do get the 9 grand divided by the useful life in years. So if there's a lifespan, how much are we trying to actually figure it out by? That will give you depreciation. How much has it decreased over time? Your residual value. So it is unusual for an asset to lose all its value over its useful life to a business. It depends on what it is, though. There are certain ones that you can do it. Obviously, if you use things up or if they are perishable, then usually you don't class them as long-term assets, though. But there probably are some that would be used up. Most assets will have some form of scrap value. This scrap value or residual value is the value that when the asset will be sold or scrapped. Effectively is the point when a business will replace the asset. Okay, so the annual rate of depreciation. The annual rate of depreciation is the amount of the asset loses value every year. How much does it depreciate by annually? Okay, so the decrease in the value of a fixed asset over time is calculated by the historic cost minus the residual value. So what did it originally do? The residual value, remember, is what is it going to be? What is it currently? In terms of why are we talking about it? We're usually talking about it in terms of this. So what would be the scrap value of it? And that would change depending on when you did it, divided by the useful life. So if a van was purchased for £10,000 and has an estimated residual value of £2,000 after 5 years, then the total depreciation over 5 years would be 10,000 minus 2,000 equal 8,000. Using the straight line method, annual rate of depreciation would now be £1,600 per year. 8,000 divided by 5 years. Does that make sense? And remember, you might not necessarily get £2,000 for it at the end of it, and it depends on how long you're going to have it for and things like that. So, and what happens to the asset in the time, natural wear and tear. It could be in an accident or anything like that. Okay. So if firms did not use depreciation, then the value of the firm's assets would be shown in the balance sheet at the value that they were originally bought for. Why is this a problem? Well, it would indicate that the firm owns assets that are worth more than they actually are. Assets employed figure would be higher than its true value. Okay, so basically, when we're talking about the assets employed, we'd be talking about you would have a problem balancing your balance sheet because there would be significantly more value to the asset than would be able to be shown by how have we put money into this, how much have we paid for this things. So you wouldn't be able to show where money goes, and remember that's what a balance sheet is for, isn't it? Yeah, and it would indicate the firm owns assets that are worth more than they really are. It's really important that we understand that a little bit of window dressing is okay, to make it look like that we own more, but this would confuse the whole system because this would be doing window dressing essentially, but doing it wrong. You're just wrong. Because you'd be saying, oh well, a MacBook in 2019 that you bought in 2011 is not worth $2,000 or whatever people have paid for it when they first bought it. It will be worth a depreciated amount, wouldn't it? So claiming that asset is still worth £2,000 is just going to cock the whole thing up. It's not going to be useful to you. It's going to make a mess of your balance sheet, and it's not going to balance either because it won't make sense. Well, wait a minute. How can you have this many assets when you haven't employed this much money? Oh well, yeah, it doesn't work, does it? Okay. So importance of depreciation, we've got accurate accounts. That's one thing that we sense them. Valuing the business accurately, not overestimated, not underestimated. We want to get it as good as we can. Matching benefits with costs, and provision. In terms of are we actually have the ability to meet whatever we need to do? Do we actually have the assets to enable us to do things as well? All right. So the annual depreciation amount is shown as a business expense on the profit and loss account. Depreciation also affects fixed assets on the balance sheet. As existing fixed assets are depreciated each year, the value of existing fixed assets will fall on an annual basis. When assets are revalued on their annual basis, the balance sheet will show the assets at their net book value. What we say net book value, we just mean at this new value. It's correct value. It's depreciated value. All right, so it's as good a representation of a true reflection of what the value of that product is or that asset is at that time. Balance sheet shows the historic cost of an asset, the original value of an asset, the depreciation today, and the net book value. So what it was at the start when we bought it, the amount of depreciation that has been deducted up to the date of the balance sheet. So we actually show what we've done. We physically show that. And then the net book value, the present value of the asset, historic minus the depreciation. All right, remember net is always when everything's been taken off. So the historic is in what we bought it for, depreciation is how much we've taken off, and net is what it's worth now in that regard. All right, so for example, a vehicle has been owned for 2 years and its annual depreciation figure is 2,000. It originally cost 10,000. In the profit and loss account, 2,000 will be shown as an expense for depreciation that is a particular year. The year the profit and loss account stands for. All right. So how much have we spent? How much have we used of that? Essentially, that's what the provision section's about. How much have we, we've spent. We've used £2,000 worth of value there, haven't we? Really, in terms of that wear and tear of that. So the balance sheet would look like this. Oops. There you go. It would say original value, depreciation to debt, and net book value like that with your fixed asset. So it would show the depreciation over time. And this is a bit more complicated than we usually have, but it would be like that in reality. Okay. So annual depreciation is your cost minus your scrap value of your useful years in life. There is a thing for you to have a go at if you want to. Feel free. I will put them up to be able to give you an access to them and things like that. All right. Now, I know it's been a lot of jibber jabber today. You know, a lot of things of, you know, if you can't remember balance sheets, it might be a bit confusing and things like that. So, and I know that if you can't remember balance sheets or if you can't remember, you know, income statements and things like that, then the depreciation can be quite confusing because I'm assuming a level of knowledge already, aren't I, that we're just chatting through it rather than me teaching it you for the first time because we talked about it earlier on. So, I will put the things up anyway in the place where we keep the different documents, which I'll do it straight after this. I've not done them yet, but I will do, and to give you access to them. But also, yeah, just go back, just have a look back at your old packs, have a look back at the old videos if you want to have a look at, you know, other things. I'm going to do those little 1 minute things for you, how you do a balance sheet, how you do a break even chart, you know, things like that. How you do a couple of ratios just to get you back into it, give you a little bit of help. But remember, if you get stuck or anything like that, please feel free to get in touch and I'll help you out as much as I can. All right. Now, just before we finish, I will pop on the news as we always do, and we'll have a little look at what is happening in the world. Okay, let's have a look. Here we are. Welcome to BBC. Ministers under pressure over school return date. A number of councils either express opposition or warn they will not be ready to open in the 1st of June. Yeah, this is a thing that's going on at the moment, isn't it? We've got virus contact traces emails shared by accident. Outsourcing giant Serco has apologised as a data breach already. Yeah, don't. It's very worrying, this app thing. I'd be very wary of installing anything that the government gives you in that regard. Cancer surgery delays risk thousands of deaths. Millions take over from super cyclone. Toy and vegetable costs rise as fuel price drops. So look at this one then. So it says the UK's inflation rate, remember we were talking about inflation before, weren't we? The UK's inflation rate fell in April to its lowest since August 2016 as the economic fallout from the first month of lockdown hit prices. The Consumer Price Index, if you remember what the Consumer Price Index is, the Consumer Price Index is where they get an average basket of goods and they have a look at how much it's increased or decreased over time, and they do the rate of inflation and things like that off that, you know, in terms of what they call the CPI, Consumer Price Index. They can show you that. So it says it fell to 0.8% from 1.5% in March. Fueling petrol and diesel prices plus lower energy bills were the main drivers pushing inflation lower, because remember, it's interesting that, because you'd think people would have more money, but at this moment in time, they're not going out to spend it, are they? So, it says, but the prices of games and toys rose, which the ONS said that may be due to people spending more time at home. Yeah, I think that's fair play. As I said, I spent an absolute fortune on the big Lego set, so not something I would usually do, but, you know. It says, Deputy National Statistician for Economic Statistics at the ONS said, while the coronavirus limited the availability of some goods and services, its effect on prices was more muted. He said that food prices generally rose no more quickly than other goods, though fresh vegetables did see stronger rises, because people are having on this whole health kick thing at the minute, aren't they? The ONS said that petrol prices dropped by 10.4p a litre between March and April, the biggest fall since unleaded petrol records began in 1990 amid a slump in global oil prices. He said that clothes retailers hit during the early stages of lockdown by weaker footfall, and then the closure of outlets resorted to more discount sales than usual, inflation to 0.8. So essentially, the value, it's still, you know, the value of the pound is still falling slightly, 0.8%. It's going to be, you know, in time. And in terms of this, we did actually have a little bit of, this was, you know, in a bad time here, wasn't it? We had a little bit of negative, so we're actually, we had a real sort of stalling in the market of things like that. Let's have another look. Oh yeah, that guy is getting a knighthood. I'm not really sure why. I think it's impressive that he's able to do that much money, but I think the coronavirus has helped him out a bit in that regard. If people are, you know, at home a lot more. But fair play to the guy. He should have got, you know, in that regard though, I'd give him a knighthood for the fact that he was in the war and he was doing all that stuff rather than doing it because he walked down the street or whatever he did. Still impressive, but I'd give him the knighthood for something, you know, like that he's already done rather than that. But anyway. Rolls-Royce has said it will cut 9,000 jobs and warned it will take several years for the airline industry to recover the coronavirus pandemic. Derby-based firm, which makes plane engines, said the reduction of nearly a fifth of its workforce would mainly affect its civil aerospace division. This is not a crisis of our making, but it is a crisis that we face and we must deal with. The bulk of job cuts are expected to be in the UK. It's site at Derby, or is it Derby? I don't know. Rolls-Royce employs 52,000 people globally, and Mr. East told the BBC's Today programme that the company had not concluded on exactly where the job losses would be due to having to consult with unions. But he said it's fair to say that our civil aerospace business, approximately 2/3 of the total employees of the UK at the moment, and that's probably a good first proxy. Yeah, well, it's just statistically more likely, isn't it? Said Unite the Union said the decision was shameful optimism. The company has accepted public money to furlough thousands of workers. Unite's Assistant General Secretary. Unite and Britain's taxpayers deserve a more responsible approach to a national emergency. We call upon Rolls-Royce to step back from the brink and work with us in a better way to get through this crisis. It's difficult. He said they furloughed 4,000 workers in the UK last month. Some 3,700 people remain on the coronavirus job retention scheme. Through the government pays 80% of a worker's wage. No government can extend these furlough schemes for years into the future. We have to look at ourselves and make sure that we meet medium-term demand. And that's the reality of the situation, isn't it? And this is what people have to be ready for. And realistically, this is going to happen with Brexit anyway, though, especially in that kind of thing. Rolls-Royce are probably doing that because they know that this is going to be a big mess as well. Remember, Brexit is still happening and we've not got a deal yet. Concerns over out-of-pocket rail passengers. Some season ticket holders are in the dark over refunds. It says Johnson & Johnson stopped selling baby powder in the US. Oh, wow, let's look at that. It says healthcare giant Johnson & Johnson to stop selling its talc-based Johnson's baby powder in the US and Canada. The firm faces thousands of lawsuits from consumers who claim that its talc products caused their cancer. The move comes after years of litigation where Johnson & Johnson had been ordered to pay billions of dollars in compensation. The company has consistently defended the safety of its talc products. Johnson & Johnson said that it would wind down sales of its products, which makes up about 0.5% of its consumer health business in the coming months, but that retailers would continue to sell existing inventory. The firm faces more than 16,000 consumer lawsuits alleging that the company's talc products were contaminated with asbestos. The firm said the demand has been declining in the North due to a large part of changes in consumer habits fueled by misinformation that's the safety of the product. It said it's faced a large barrage of lawyers advertising for clients to sue the firm. We remain steadfastly confident that the safety in talc-based Johnson's baby powder, decades of independent scientific studies by medical experts around the world say it support the safety of the product. Never heard of that. The firm is appealing against a 2018 order to pay $4.7 billion in damages to 22 women who alleged that its talc products caused them to develop ovarian cancer. Wow. Well, it must have some kind of credibility if they've got an order to do it, isn't it? Ooh, now this is a big one. On Facebook shops, online stores open on Facebook and Instagram. Nearly 1 million businesses in the UK and around the world are now set up on a single online store to sell products with no fee on Facebook and Instagram. The initial stage of the Facebook shops rollout has been brought forward and extended because of COVID-19. The stores will appear on business pages, Instagram profiles, and then targeted ads. The company has already used a no-fees approach on its Facebook marketplace for personal classifieds. It's bigger than usual just because we want to make sure that we're moving quickly to get these tools in the hands of as many businesses, wherever they are, big or small, to help them survive during this time. Obviously, given the current situation, we have accelerated a lot of our efforts. We are in a unique position to be able to contribute to the survival of a bunch of these businesses. You can go much deeper now without having to leave the app. Interesting. I mean, it's trying to get people to go back to Facebook, isn't it? Facebook's becoming bigger than it used to be. It's not as cool as Instagram. It's not, things like that. But it is something that I think Facebook Marketplace is a fantastic bit of kit, and it's... although I can't stand people on it. It really aggravates me with people when they, don't get back in touch with you. And you can see that they've seen the message and stuff like that. Just take it off. If you've not got the product or if you've sold it, just take it off the marketplace. It's not a big thing. Or just message me and say, no, I haven't got it anymore. Don't leave me hanging. It's rather aggravating. Anyway, I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.